she wasn't even alive when the movie was made, and yet she had this connection to it as like a 20-year-old college student. And so I don't know, that means a lot to me that something like this can still connect with young people.
It's the first time that it's in cinemas in Mexico. So how do you feel of people watching this movie for the first time in the cinemas of Mexico?
It feels great. It feels really great. You know, when we opened the movie 25 years ago, it started in 2001 in the U.S. and it sort of started to roll out through Europe. And over the next 2 years, um, once it sort of started to catch on with DVD, because we had a really rough start when this movie first came out in 2001. It was literally 5 or 6 weeks after 9/11, and we had no marketing even before that tragedy, and so it was just the movie just barely like limped out into theaters in a very sad time where no one really was looking to go to the movies at all, much less a movie like this. So the fact that the movie continued to sort of survive and push its way out into the world and through Europe, and finding its way to theaters finally in Mexico 25 years later is really wonderful, and particularly because I feel like there's just every, I guess maybe 10 years or so, there's another generation that comes of age and discovers the movie. And there are, I just did an event in Virginia a couple of days ago at the University of Virginia, and the young woman moderating was born in 2005. So she wasn't even alive when the movie was made, and yet she had this connection to it as like a 20-year-old college student. And so I don't know, that means a lot to me that something like this can still connect with young people, because you're always afraid like of your art like becoming irrelevant. As you get older, you're like, you don't want your stuff to just especially with the younger generation, for them to look at your stuff and think it's lame. You never want that. And maybe that'll happen to me. You never know. Maybe it happens to everyone, but I'm just grateful that younger people still like this thing. So.
Yeah, well, probably you don't know this, but it's my case. I'm from 2003. So
2003.
yeah,
Okay.
and I recently just watched Donnie Darko for the first time, and it blew my mind.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
I was kind of wondering, in what time did you notice that this was becoming a cult film and not a film like a very gross and very large movie for the theaters?
Well, we never had a chance for it to be successful in theaters. We had no marketing. The distributor who bought the film really didn't believe in it, to be honest. They only bought it just because they needed to they had great success with Christopher Nolan's Memento. They had just distributed Memento for Christopher Nolan in the spring of 2001. And no one believed in that film at the time because they thought it was too cerebral with the backwards narrative. And so they had success with Memento. So they took a chance with Donnie, but they didn't. So there was no marketing. So the movie never had a chance to become successful ever in theaters. It was just never the case because just there was no money behind it, and it was just no one believed in it. So it had to find success on its own terms, in terms of like DVD and word of mouth, and then midnight screenings that really began in the Lower East Side, or the East Village, I think, at a theater called the Pioneer Two Boots Theater. Okay. In February of 2002, I was walking through the Lower East Side in Manhattan, and I saw this poster hanging out outside of a pizza restaurant. Cool. And I went in and I asked the owner, and he said, we're playing your movie every Saturday night at midnight, and it's selling out in our little theater we have in the back of our restaurant. And I showed up the next Saturday night, and there was cameras there, and like Michael Musto from The Village Voice was there, and it was just like I could tell that this movie had a new life, that it had somehow connected on its own terms, that had nothing to do with like a distribution company believing in it. It was just on its own terms, So.
Wow.
Yeah.
And getting inside of the movie, I'm a total freak, so I wanted to know more about it. So I started reading the structures, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot more sense when you read it and when you see the film after. But why did you want it, that story specifically to make it into the film?
The Graham Greene short story.
Yes.
I just remember reading that in high school. I had a lot of
Okay.
wonderful high school students who inspired Drew Barrymore. They kind of went into Drew Barrymore's character,
Yeah.
Karen Pomeroy. I had about 3 different incredible English teachers in high school who taught me Graham Greene and so many, so many of the great writers that, Watership Down is by Richard Adams, which is in the director's cut of the movie. Those were 2 texts that just sort of connected with me, and I think something about the Destructors reminded me of like young teenage boys who um, like to smash things. Like they just like to watch things blow up, or the idea of like tearing down institutions or tearing down authority. Um, you think resorting to some physical violence, but in the story, they're dismantling this old home, and I think it has a lot to do with trauma of post World War II trauma that these young British working class men were experiencing. But I thought that's maybe universal, the teenage mindset in wanting to tear things down.